can't buy my silence, you can't steal my voice, you can't keep me quiet. I will bring the noise. Try to beat me down, tell me to shut my mouth, but there's a time to speak, and the time is now.
So the students are familiar with your background, and they've been looking at some of your interviews and your speeches and some of your articles, such as the one that you put out today on Consortium News. And
good. You've seen that, huh?
Yeah, we're up to date.
Wow.
So
this is unusual.
We've done our homework. So,
great.
What has motivated you over the past years, and why have you been doing what you have been doing? Was there like a point where your worldview changed over the years to become more of an activist?
Are we on? Am I on speaker, so to speak, now?
Well, we can all hear you.
Great. Okay. Well, yes. Actually, what people don't realize is that when the CIA was set up, and that was right after World War II, the primary objective was to have one place that the President Truman at the time, could turn to and say, okay, tell me what's going on in this country. I don't want to hear any varnishing here of this information. I want you to tell me it straight. The Pentagon is telling me that the Soviets are 10 feet tall, and I know that they can't be 10 feet tall. And the State Department is defending their policies here and there. I want one person that I can go to, the Director of Central Intelligence. I want to be able to have my secretary call him up and say, I want you down at my office at 3 o'clock this afternoon because I have some really important decisions that I'm involved with in supporting the President, and I want your top specialists. Now, that was the original idea that Truman had, and that was all in place and all part of the legislation that emerged as the National Security Act of 1947. What happened was an accident of history. Home from the war came the Office of Strategic Services folks. These are the very courageous, actually, very imaginative, covert action people, dropping in behind lines, bringing Ho Chi Minh on their shoulders into Hanoi when the Japanese were driven out. These were people who were operational people, and they came back from the war, and there was great applause, of course, and these people said, well, thanks very much for the ovation, but do you still need us? I mean, do you need people that are expert at overthrowing governments and the kinds of things that we do? And so in that context, we're talking 1946, 1947, the question answered itself because the Russians had just taken over Eastern Europe, were threatening the Balkans and Italy and France. And the KGB, the Soviet secret police, was active all around the world overthrowing governments and doing things like that. And so the question answered itself. And the answer was, of course, yes, of course we need you. And then someone made a very profound mistake. They said, well, curiously, your timing is good because we're just creating this Central Intelligence Agency. And since they'll have their own spies to collect information that the president needs, they'll have to be classified. They'll have to be secret. And so we'll just put you right into that same agency. Now, that was what I call a structural fault from the beginning. Because you can't have operators, you can't have people running wars, as Bill Casey did under Reagan, and then expect to have anybody believe you that you're giving an impartial assessment of, for example, the prospects for the war in Nicaragua. And so, long story short, from the very beginning, there was two agencies. One, the one that Truman intended. The other, a covert action agency adept at overthrowing governments, which Truman never intended, and which Truman said he never intended before he died. And that's why you have the kind of situation where you have an agency that, before Iraq, was pretty much tasked with making sure that the president was advised on what the situation with respect to Iraq was. Now, up until that time, most of the analysts in the agency would tell it straight, without fear or favor. They would give the president their unvarnished view. And I remember, I had career protection for doing that. In talking about Vietnam, for example, and the futility of some of the policies adopted there by our government, I knocked a lot of noses out of joint. Important noses on the lapel of which there were 4 stars, okay? And they would complain bitterly to the head of the CIA, but the head of the CIA would say, well, we think McGovern is right, and so he's going to speak truth to power no matter how many noses he knocks out of joint. Now, I say McGovern, but it was all of us. But what happened was, when Ronald Reagan came into office, he brought in with him Bill Casey to head the CIA, and Bobby Gates, who was a fellow who attached himself to Casey. And Casey and Gates believed that there were Soviets under Iraq and Nicaragua, and more important, they believed that the Soviet Union would never die, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union would never give up power. And when many of us objected to that and said, well, that's not reality as we saw it, well, they removed us. They put us in different jobs. And what bubbled up to the managerial ranks of the agency from 1981 till 2001, we're talking 20 years, a whole generation, that corrupted the CIA, even the analysis functions. And what you got was a bunch of yes men. And so, long story short, before Iraq, when the president made it clear that he wanted to make a war, the head of the CIA, George Tenet at the time, decided, well, if the president wants to make a war, then, our job is to manufacture, embellish, exaggerate evidence to make it easy for the president to make a war. And what I'm really sorry to say is that my colleagues in the analysis unit bent with that because of the managers that had been promoted under Casey and Gates for those 20 years. So we had not only the corruption of the operational end of things, witness the torture, the kidnapping, the black sites where people were tortured, but you had the corruption of the analysis divisions. Now, this is a long-winded answer to your question, but the reason that I began to speak out was when I saw my profession being corrupted. My profession was an honorable one. As I said, I had career protection for speaking truth to power. When that was no longer the case, and we saw that our former colleagues, when I say our, I mean many of my colleagues who had retired, when we saw that our former colleagues were bending to the prevailing winds, quite against the ethos that was prevalent during our days, and kind of doing the bidding of Casey and Gates, we decided that we would form veteran intelligence professionals for Sanity. And the record is clear. We have 24 issuances out now on warisacrime.org/VIPS. And that was the divide for me when I saw my profession being corrupted, being prostituted, really. And the reason? Well, to deceive our representatives in Congress out of their constitutional right, their constitutional prerogative to declare or otherwise authorize war, Well, that's as bad as it gets. And so, thankfully, a handful of colleagues and I started writing and trying to expose all this. That's where we got the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, VIPS. Started out with 5. Now there are about 75. 10 or 12 or 15 are active in any one issuance. And if you're familiar with my website, you will have seen the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity memorandum, which we wrote just last Friday to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, telling him, number one, General, with all due respect, you said that any strike on Syria would be, quote, an act of war, end quote. You know that Section 1, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution says that only Congress, the representatives of the people, can declare or authorize war. It looks very much as though the president is going to start a war without congressional authorization. And if that happens, General Dempsey, we are counting on you to honor your oath, your solemn oath, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and quit. That's how strongly we feel about this. We have certain hints that General Dempsey may have gotten that memo and may have plumbed his conscience and said, wow, what's the rush here? Why do we have to do this thing on Syria right now before the UN inspectors give their results? And as you know, the president said on Saturday that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has advised me that there's really no rush here. We can do what we want to do tomorrow or the next day or next week or next month. And so we're going to go to congressional authorization. So, long story short, we feel very strongly about our oath, our solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we see the President of the United States violating his own oath to see that the laws of the country are faithfully executed and observed by pretending that he has the right to start a war without congressional authorization. And we'll have to see in the next 2 weeks how this plays out. There's a chance, a slight chance, I think, that the president will go ahead, even if he does not get authorization from Congress. But if he does so, it'll be clearly a violation not only of U.S. law, but of international law.
We have a question here from a student. Just to comment that for myself, you're an inspiration, and the students got a kick when they watched the video of your confrontation with Donald Rumsfeld, and so I really enjoy people who put confront the truth and put truth to power. Yeah. So here's a question from a student from France.
Sure. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr.
Thank you.
I would like to grant you I would like to thank you to grant your time first. So my question is really short. Is because I did try to find some information on the internet, and indeed I didn't find so.
I'm sorry, we're not having a very good connection here. Could you speak very slowly and very loudly?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
So my question is, what consequence would be if an agent, related with the CIA, would reveal part of a classified document? Would a consequence this document will be disclassified, or I don't know, or there's some sanction for the agent, or what do you think about it? Thank you.
Okay, as I understand the question, it is what would happen to a CIA agent if he revealed or she revealed classified information. Do I have that right, or is it not quite right?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, it's a complicated answer, but let me try to make it as straightforward as I can. When you come on board, when you sign on with the CIA or other intelligence agencies, Part of your employment requires a promise not to release secrets that could damage the national security. So you sign a secrecy promise. Now, are promises important? Of course they are. You don't violate promises willy-nilly. But if, as Bradley Manning did, if you see war crimes, if you see U.S. soldiers shooting up civilians trying to rescue wounded civilians, which by definition is a war crime, if you see people being tortured, then you still have a conscience. You can't, in my view, simply say, oh, well, it's a secret, and I signed this promise, and so I can't say anything. When you look into moral theology or ethics, the ethicists say that there's a gradation of values here, that any moral decision depends on the circumstances. And when you compare the good of preventing civilians from being killed or tortured against the good that comes of obeying your promise not to reveal secrets, well, moral theologians say that the first, the objective of stopping a war or stopping unnecessary killing or torture, is what they call a supervening value, okay? Supervening value, meaning that value dwarfs in significance the value of keeping your promise. So there are gradations of values here. I subscribe to the notion that the necessity to act to stop a war or to stop torture or the kinds of things that Bradley Manning saw, war crimes, that is much more important than keeping an oath, or not an oath, but a promise that you signed on a piece of paper. And part of that has to do with the reason that you signed the promise on this piece of paper, the secrecy promise. And that secrecy promise is explicitly designed so that people do not release information that would harm the national security. It's not a promise to keep information secret that is a crime or that is a war crime. And what Bradley Manning did, whom I really admire very much, is he saw that there was a difference between keeping this promise and trying to stop the abuse that was going on, the killing and so forth. And so he very courageously said, well, I still have a conscience, and I'm going to reverse what I promised here in hopes of achieving a much more important good. And he said so explicitly in his email correspondence with that fellow in California that turned him in. So all I'm saying here is that when you see a situation as a intelligence analyst, and you see that there's a conflict between keeping your secrecy promise and doing something to tell the American people, for example, what kinds of war crimes are being committed, what kinds of torture and other things are going on, then I subscribe to the notion that latter consideration is much more important than a piece of paper on which you promise not to reveal national security information. The more so, since you're not endangering the national security interest of the United States. All you're doing is releasing information that would be an extreme embarrassment to the United States. There's a difference between embarrassment and national security damage. So if you take Bradley Manning and you take Edward Snowden, I think these are people who are paragons of virtue, who in their 20s, and this is important, okay? They're in their 20s. Snowden was 29. Bradley Manning was 22. They had this sense of conscience that impelled them not to obey orders to keep their mouths shut, but to release in Bradley Manning's case, the war crime information, and in the case of Edward Snowden, the gross violations of our constitutional rights, particularly those inculcated in the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which is supposed to protect us against unreasonable searches and seizures.
Okay, and we have, I liked your answer, and we have a final question or two. Here's from a student.
Hi, I'm Finn from Australia. I think you were covering this before, but my question is a little bit different. I'm interested, why would Obama go to the Congress for approval to launch a war with Syria? He didn't ask for it to go into Libya. He doesn't need it to launch military action so long as he doesn't call it a war. And he knew that it would be very difficult to pass. So I'm wondering, maybe it was he wanted to stall, or I don't. To me, it seems kind of illogical to do. He didn't do it in the past, so yeah.
That's a very good question. Yeah, a very good question. You see, it has to do with the Constitution. Now, he didn't ask for congressional approval before what they did in Libya. And they bragged about not having asked for congressional approval. And specifically, when they were asked about Syria, and this goes back several months ago, would they proceed on Syria the same way that they proceeded on Libya? The answer given by then Defense Secretary Panetta was, yeah, sure we will. Yeah, the president has the authority to defend the country. Okay? Now, in my view, in the view of actual constitutional lawyers and experts, that's wrong. The president doesn't have that kind of authority. You see, our Constitution was crafted by people who came out of the English experience, where kings could march people up to war, for their own good, of course, right? But without any say on the part of the people. And so James Madison and George Mason, the crafters of our Constitution, and the other founders were hell-bent and determined that that was not going to happen in this new country. And so they reserved the right, they reserved the authority to declare or otherwise authorize or finance war to the people of the United States through their elected representatives in Congress. And that is in the very first article of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. Now, the last time that Congress declared war was in 1941 after the attack on Pearl Harbor. So World War II was the last time that the U.S. declared war. And if you look at the wars that we've been involved in, Korea, Vietnam, more recently Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, none of them were authorized by Congress. All of them turned out to be a debacle, in my view. And so there's great wisdom in the fact that our founders insisted that the law read that only Congress could authorize war. Now, the fact that Obama didn't go that route for Libya set a kind of a precedent. But, you know, after all these failed escapades, and I'm thinking more recently of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya, when it's very clear these were big mistakes, the American people are getting a little bit angry about not having any say when the president wants to go off and make a war, when the president, in short, acts like a king. And so in this case, the president wanted to retaliate against Syria. Now, the question was, does he have the authority to do that without congressional authorization? And all last week, he and his top officials claimed, yes, he did have that authority. And even on Saturday, when the president went up before the cameras in the Rose Garden, he asserted that he had the authority to do this, but that he would ask for congressional authorization. Now, whether he really believes he has the authority to do that, I don't know. But I know what the Constitution says, and it says he does not have the authority to do that. So his move in going to Congress to get authorization was something that is according to the law, in accordance with the law, and he thinks, I think, that they can prevail on the Congress. They can make believe that this gas attack was surely attributable to the head of Syria, which I have my doubts about, and that they can retaliate against Syria. So that's where it lies now. It's going to be very interesting to see if the Congress is deceived, in my view, is deceived into thinking that this is in the best interest of the United States to flail out at a country and get more deeply involved in yet another war.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for the next generation of future humanitarian workers and diplomats studying international relations?
I do. A person my age it's easy to succumb to pessimism. When I talk to folks like you all, and I do a lot of that in colleges and universities, I get the feeling that you all have two aces in the hole. Okay. Now, one is a conscience. I find that young people are dismayed at some of the things that are going on. Why? Because they have this innate conscience that says these things are wrong and they shouldn't be done. Number two, you all have a technological capability that dwarfs anything that my generation had. And that can be used for good. And that's what we see with respect to Bradley Manning and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. It's no longer possible for governments to hide everything. And so what I would encourage you to do is to get technically proficient, keep your conscience, and when there's a chance to join the structure, when there's a chance to join the government, join it, because that's what we need. Don't be so pessimistic that you throw your hands up. When people ask me, should I join the CIA, I say two things. I say, do you have integrity? They say, well, yeah, I guess. And then I say, do you have courage? I say, why do you ask those two questions? Well, if you have integrity, you won't do things against your conscience. If somebody asks you to do something like bomb civilians or torture people or kidnap them or put them in black holes, you're not going to do it, okay? And courage comes in when you say, I'm not going to do that. And you're young enough, you can go some other job. I mean, it's not like an old person like me. So if you have integrity and courage, those two things work together. The technological capability is what is really new. And that's so good, That's so good that I have more faith now and more hope that you young people are going to bring us out of this morass into which we're sunk and let everybody be educated and let the secrets come out.
Mr. McGovern, we're really grateful for your time. We will continue to follow your work, and we wish you all the best on your future endeavors.
Well, thank you. Buena suerte to all.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, de nada.
Goodbye, good night.
Right, bye now.
Tried to be a good boy, but I ain't a boy no more. I've seen some things that a man just can't ignore, and this world's